your service on the battlefield and beyond. 3 Bravo.
What's going on, everybody? I'm Liam Kogan, and this is the 3 Bravo podcast. Today, we're going to be doing a VBB News Week. It's Veterans Benefits Breakdown News Week, where I'm going to be diving into some of the national headlines and really breaking down some of the VA benefits changes that might be affecting you. So, as it's been pretty regular in the news week, just because so many things are changing, and when a lot of changes are happening, unlike the legacy news cycle, really, if you're doing your homework, doing your research, there's just going to be a lot that is relatively unfounded, right? Like, there's just going to be accusations and this, that, and the other. When changes are going into effect, you don't really know what's going to happen. You can make predictions, and then you can brag about how right you were. Generally speaking, though, with all these major cuts, you can look at it like trimming the fat in a major company. So, diving right into some policy and legislative updates, they currently suspended contract cut spending. So, if you weren't privy to that, the contract cuts are basically the government contract world is massive. There's tons of money in it. And as a private company, you're basically looking to fill a bid for something that the government needs. So an example of that being the Veterans Benefits Management System, the VBMS. They contract out almost everything to a third party to come in and basically build out all these great systems, all these different suites, some healthcare suites, some provider suites. So it's not only tech. There's a lot of things that go into these government contracts, but there are thousands of government contracts in tech. And speak to anyone who's in any kind of tech field, their company probably wants to get into them. So there was a lot of worry about the proclaimed cuts that were going out for the contracting business in the government. People were really worried about just cuts to critical health services. So in the veteran community, if you're not privy, folks are worried about one of two things. They're either, or you know what, they're either worried about one thing or both things. It's, are my health services and benefit services going to be changed and depleted? And am I going to lose my job? So if you're like, even if it's not your job, people are worried about veterans in federal jobs losing them. So for this, people are really worried about veteran health services kind of taking a dive because we're cutting some of these bigger contracts that basically we contract out toxic exposure, cancer care, and some other major health, VA health services. So by basically cutting those contracts, right, and then suspending those cuts, you're letting them know that their days are numbered, and you've got to come to basically the VA in with a real bid at why your service is necessary. So what this all does, in essence, is you're taking a bunch of contracts that are already in motion for tons of money, and they may not even be providing a viable product, for which many of them don't. And a lot of that has been exposed, and I say that in air quotes because you don't have to expose that shit. If you're in the military, you just know. You're like, oh yeah, they have a contract for the computer systems that we use. They're awful. Where is that? For these systems, they're basically saying, everyone with a contract, come back to the VA, tell us what you've done thus far and why you should continue service, why people need your service. So with, cancer care, toxic exposure care, being larger and on the rise because of the PACT Act, which opened up medical benefits to a lot of Vietnam-era veterans and Gulf War-era veterans who may have been exposed to burn pits, GWAT veterans, and Agent Orange, things like that. So taking a step back and saying, we're not going to go through with all these contract cuts, but they are going to continue certifying which ones of these contracts are valid. So it's really just diving into a majorly inflated industry and just doing like a viability check. So along that line, the VA has submitted its budget for fiscal year 2025. this budget is going to emphasize modernizing all of their current equipment, their current suite for veterans to use. If we just talked about the VBMS, which is basically like you go onto the VA, you're looking through their portals, and you're applying for benefits or whatever. And generally speaking, they've gotten a lot better, right? If you got out 15 years ago and you've been using them currently, they're a lot better than they were. And through doing all this, they're justifying kind of downsizing the VA by the 80,000 people that they are federally mandated to cut, because they're going to use some of those funds and increase support, timely processing of claims, and they're going to continue honoring the PACT Act, which a lot of people were afraid of. So if that's something that's on your radar, they are going to continue honoring the PACT Act. The Secretary of the VA, Doug Collins, he has continually stated that he is not cutting benefits. So what they're doing is just reorganizing. And if you can't see that, and you see that it's some like weird conspiracy, that's on you, because that's not what it is. Too bad. So there's a lot of advocacy coming in against budget cuts, right? When they say they're cutting the budget, that's generally going to ally with contract cuts, cutting federal employees, cutting certain programs that they don't see viable, right? There's a lot of money that goes into just creating that DEI program and hosting X amount of people to go around and service, conversations and, build PowerPoints and do presentations. There's a lot of money that goes into that program. So that would be considered a budget cut. So when you're thinking about these budget cuts, it's not just like, oh my God, the military is doing budget cuts. That must mean, or the VA is doing budget cuts. That must mean my benefits are going away. That's not necessarily what it is. So there's been a lot of advocating against budget cuts, which is good. So veteran service organizations, they're actively opposing federal budget cuts that impact veterans. And they're doing that because don't see this in a light in which it's like us versus them. We're really focused on a lot of us versus them these days. When the government says, the federal government says, we are cutting X number of things or X number of employees or X number of contracts, it doesn't mean they're attacking your organization. However, it does mean that your veteran services organizations need to step up and come in and say, hey, here are the things that we don't want you to cut. We're coming to this stunt and we're the Post, and we're saying we don't want you to cut these federal benefits. We don't want you to cut things that are going to affect veterans' critical health care. We don't want you to cut veteran services officers so people can understand what their benefits are. There are a lot of things that the VSOs, veteran service organizations, need to go and rally against. It doesn't mean that they're adversarial with the administration. It means they're representing their company interests. Imagine it this way, which is so hard for people to do these days. Our government is one business. Whether you're left, whether you're right, whether you're a subsidiary company or whatever, you're drawing funds from the same thing, you're representing the same people. If you go to fight against someone in the House or the Senate or whatever, right? You're going to present your case to a committee. You are not fighting them. You are fighting because people like to donate to places that fight, but it looks good on headlines. But you're showing up and you're just saying, hey, we still need these funds. If it were a regular business, you'd show up to a board meeting and you'd say, hey, we still need these funds. Here's why. I put a 5-page slide deck together. Everyone at the table, take a peek at it. Here's what we're using them for. Here's why they're viable. There's no bad money coming out of them. Let's move forward. That's it. It's not like this crazy adversarial garbage that I keep hearing all the time. And then you have, on the lighter side of that whole movement, you have support initiatives coming out of these organizations like Salute for Service, where they're, doing an $86,000 giveaway to veterans who need it. There will be, some checks and balances thrown in there with some of these private organizations trying to help out, veteran service organizations trying to help out. That's just what's going to happen. I'm not saying right, wrong, or indifferent. That is what's going to happen. We have a downsize going on right now. A lot of things happening at a major economic level to balance spreadsheets that have been wildly imbalanced for a long time. So it's just not going to be sick for everybody. So everyone's got to come together and go in front of this current administration and say, hey, here's my pitch at why we don't need a budget cut here. We still need the dollars coming in because we're important for this reason. That's really all that's going on. So in economic and financial news, and this is like national initiative. So Kansas audited their veterans assistance grants. And so this is all going to come with this downsizing and this higher level of pressure bearing down on different veterans organization systems and state veterans affairs offices. They find things like Kansas did its internal audit on veterans assistance programs, and they found discrepancies in matching fund mandates. So that's basically matching funds to where they're supposed to go with larger veteran service organizations. So these VSOs, like the VFW, American Legion, Disabled American Veterans, DAV, like these larger organizations get these grants, get these funds, and they're supposed to be putting them in certain places and or just being accountable for where the dollar is going, right? So there's also an issue if you aren't letting the administration know where your dollars are going, or you are, and then you're wrong, right? Like you're improperly accounting for your funds. So this Kansas audit has basically highlighted a lot of discrepancies, which probably belie a lot of different organizations in different states. So I think we're going to see more of that coming forward. We're going to see more states coming forward with audits that are actually holding service organizations in their states accountable, holding the VA accountable. And really, all of that is good for veterans. All of this successful auditing is good because these dollars are going to go directly to, these organizations, these dollars, they're all for the veterans, right? So if it's not going to the right place, then it's not going to veterans. So I think there's some relative good coming out of, a tightening of the belt era. Going into some healthcare and wellness news. So you have VA hospital cuts in Saginaw, Michigan. So the reason I bring this up, right? I bring up Kansas, I bring up Saginaw, Michigan. One, because this is about, this debrief is about every state, all veteran organizations. But this kind of underpins the reality of what's going on right now, where dollars are being cut and you see a marketed outcome, like a legitimate outcome, and it sucks for a big swath of people. However, I'm going to jump into it and explain it. It's really necessary, right? So we look at the VA hospital in Saginaw, Michigan. There are protests right now against proposed cuts because these proposed cuts at a national level would effectively shut this hospital down. They just don't have enough people to run it if you're cutting 80,000, 83,000 people from the VA. So there are 2,000 veterans in Midland County, Michigan. That's who's basically going to be serviced by this Saginaw, Michigan VA hospital. So it's a small hospital. 2,000 veterans in that community is very, very small. Because we're eliminating a lot of federal employees, and I say we because we're all Americans. Unfortunately, even if you don't agree, you are also part of this. It's just how the game works here. I said this when Biden was in office. I said this when anyone's in office. Yes, that is your president. This is your administration. Unfortunately for you. Or fortunately, however you want to see it, I really don't care. The VA hospital in Saginaw, Michigan is small. They're servicing 2,000 veterans in the Midland County Michigan, and they're protesting to try to keep their hospital open because over 88,000 federal employees are going to be cut from the VA. That means a lot of draw is going to go to places like Detroit, Michigan, where there are tons of veterans as well. You're just going to see some of these smaller places very likely close down, and that's going to force older vets your mind immediately probably goes to someone who's 85, needs the health care or desires the health care and has to drive to Detroit or somewhere a little bit bigger, Flint. And it's very unfortunate. But that's the name of the game of a downsize, right? Like, you're not going to get rid of Detroit, Michigan's VA hospital. You're not going to get rid of Flint, Michigan's VA hospital, because those are huge and they service tons of people. You're going to get rid of the small ones. It's unfortunate for the people who live there, but when you're thinking of the greater good or just how to run a business, yeah, it'd be amazing if they had a VA hospital right where I am in northwestern Reno, northwest Nevada, but they don't. So I have to go to Reno. That's okay. It's just a fact of the matter. Now, if you have someone older, they're going to have to figure things out. Maybe they can help out. And by doing these protests, the VA will host a bus transit system from the Saginaw location to Detroit. Yes, it's going to take longer. It's going to be less convenient, but you'll still get your health care. That's what the protest is for. And that's also what the cut is for. You're just tightening the belt. Right, wrong, or indifferent, that's what's happening. Along those lines, veterans in Wyoming and Connecticut are also getting outside, letting it be heard that they're worried about their healthcare being cut. So in Wyoming, people are worried about critical health services being cut because Wyoming is so small. If you didn't know, Wyoming is a very depopulated state, and it's beautiful, but they don't have a huge population in a lot of places. So a lot of those veterans are already driving pretty far for healthcare services. They're worried about the VA location in Cheyenne. I would say to any Wyoming veteran, I don't think you need to be worried about the Cheyenne location in Wyoming. It's kind of mission critical for the state. If your state VA isn't sticking up for you in that regard, send me an email, because that's BS, and we should start putting a petition together. And in Connecticut is worried because they employ so many federal employees. And so when you lose that many employees, so many people become unemployed in one state. So they're basically bursting with federal employees. And that's like an exaggeration, but they have a lot of federal employees. So the state is worried that that kind of job shift is going to be a burden on the state. So two different aspects, really three, from Michigan to Wyoming to Connecticut, just highlighting that these cuts are affecting everyone in different ways. And the best way to look at this is to be practical. The one thing you can do, if you're really worried, you can get out and protest. You can talk to your senators and Congress people, and you can put a petition together. That's what you can do. You can be an American citizen, and you can show them that you're all unified and that you need something. You make your considerations known. You get a bus system going. That's what you can do. For a place like Connecticut, if you're losing a lot of employees in a certain space that's like relatively small, so you're going to expect like 2,000 to 7,000 people joining the job market in a local area, that is something that you can also hit the streets, but you're going to have to start talking to, local adversaries and local administrations and try to figure out a plan, right? So moving into some of the employment considerations, the VA is offering employees another opportunity to accept a deferred resignation. So if you weren't tracking and you are a federal employee, I would start spreading this word, unless you already know. The deferred resignation is basically giving you a 30-day leave period where you're still getting paid and you start figuring out your next job opportunity. They did that initially. I believe the leave period was longer initially. I believe it was 60 days. But if you are getting laid off, or you think you might, or you don't want to go from remote work back to work, you can take a 30-day deferment, get paid for 30 days, find a new job. This is going to change the way the labor market is in America right now, because there's a lot of federal employees looking for work and they have great resumes. So if you're a veteran and you were working with the federal government, there's going to be sympathy on two fronts. Finding a job isn't always easy. It's stressful, but you just have to treat it like a job. You wake up 9 to 5 or a lot longer. You can work a lot longer if you really need to. And apply. If you need to build resumes, VBOCs, so Veteran Business Outreach Centers, are hosted by the Small Business Administration, the SBA, and they're in conjunction with the VA, and each state has them in certain, populated locations. You can go there, you can write resumes, you can kind of re-engage in the job market. So if that's something that you need, I advise you to go do so. Take your 30 days, get paid while you're figuring it out, go travel to a VBOC, and really dive into getting a new job, something that you might enjoy more than you did before. And if you really enjoy federal work, I would start looking at local, VFWs and American Legions and see what they have. And hopefully you can find a VSO job, because we can always use more of those. And unfortunately, it lies in the hands of the VSOs, Veteran Service Organizations, to fund that position. So, and we need more. It's a weird way we shook this whole thing out, but it's just built by necessity and historical necessity. So if you're looking for a really good job out of the federal sphere, I would go look at your VFW, go look at your American Legion, go look at your DAV, and see what you can do for your country still, still find a reason to serve. So as we kind of transition, we're like fully in spring now, we're seeing a lot of these trade deals happen, and we're seeing a lot of tariffs and yada, yada, yada. Take a moment to just take a breath. If you're looking for new work, go look for new work, but also remember to just get outside, get some fresh air, call a buddy, and, take care of your mental health, because these are unfortunately stressful times, but they don't have to be. Stress is a state of mind. You will never finish a job or reach a goal by stressing more. You will never de-stress by stressing. And it's a silly thing to say, but a lot of people don't really put that into action, right? You're stressed, you're depressed, you're dealing with major issues, and those are never solved by stress and anxiety. Unfortunately, they're byproducts of it. Eat good food, get outside, exercise, and put in the effort to try to solve your problem. If you do not put in the effort to try to solve your problem and put it on the back burner and try to do other things and pretend other things are more important, you will build more stress and anxiety. So in these stressful times, try to live some work-life balance. And remember that as a veteran, the military taught us to double down on our American traits, pursue happiness, enjoy freedom, and build ourselves up to something that's worth something, right? The military teaches you discipline. The military teaches you to show up on time. The military teaches you to do hard things that you never thought you could do. It didn't teach you to think that you deserve a job. It didn't teach you to deserve anything. So try to take that tactical pause, regain that military mindset, and get out there and crush life, represent our community well. I'm Liam Cogan. This is the 3 Bravo podcast, and that was the news week for 04/09/2025. See you guys later.